Okay, so one final quick tutorial is how to export your UVs to, say, Photoshop, so you could do the drawing and painting work there. And to do that, really what we're not doing is we're not exporting UVs, we're adding a layer that shows the UV mesh on our material that we're trying to edit. And then we're going to bring that into Photoshop, and we can see that layer, and then use that layer as a guide. And so to do that, we are going to first come into our scene and notice that I have this material selected, right? I have material 1 selected. It's still editable. Just as a note, if you've saved this and exited the program and reopened it, sometimes there will be a red X where you won't be able to edit the material, even though you know it's material. And all you have to do is click on that X and make it a pen again. So I'm on this material. So if I go to Layers, I come down here and I have some options, but there's an option here that is grayed out, and that is UV. Where is it? Oh, it's this one over here, right? It's Create UV Mesh Layer, right? But it's grayed out. So why is it grayed out? The reason it's grayed out is because I don't currently have my snake selected in my Objects Manager. Right, so in order to be able to see those UVs and apply them to this texture, I need to have that object selected, right? I can still paint on this object as it stands now, right? I could come in here and just draw some lines, even though I don't have the object selected because I have the material selected, right? So I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to go to my objects. I'm going to go ahead and select my Danger Noodle object. I'm going to go back to Layers. And now you'll see that this layer is no longer grayed out, right? Now it knows what objects, UVs, I want to apply to this material. And so then I can just go ahead and click on that. And it should create this UV mesh layer. As soon as I do that, even though I am currently in, actually don't know what mode I'm in 3D Paint mode. Right, but I don't have, right, display is just set to Gerard shading, but you can see the lines on the polygons. And that's because those are actually painted on the object right now as a layer. Right, so if I zoom in and render this, you'll see that even when I render it, those lines are still there. And that's because, as I said, they are a layer. And so now what we need to do is we need to save our file. And so we could either just save the texture we're working on. We can just go down to, right, Save Texture. And you'll notice if you look over here where it says matte.1_color.tiff, that's the file we're saving. And it's got that star next to it. If I go over here and I just say Save Texture, I believe that star, that little asterisk will disappear, and that means that it's been saved. The asterisk means it's been edited since the last time it was saved. Right, so there's no asterisk, that means it's good to go. And I don't even need to save my file at this point because I've saved that material. So now what I can do is I can come over to Photoshop. And so I can come over to Photoshop and I can just say File, Open, and go to where that file is. So if I go to Texturing and Bodypaint, and I come down here, it's this matte.1_color.tiff. So if I go ahead and open that up, I should have all of my layers here, including that very top UV mesh layer. So, right, if I was to go ahead and turn off some of these layers, in fact, if I just turn all of the layers off, right now I can't see much of anything. So I'm going to create a new layer just as like a base, just a solid color so I can see. I know those lines are whitish, and what I need to do is move this down below the UV mesh layer for the time being. And so I'm going to choose a color that is significantly darker, like close to black. And then I'm just going to use my paint bucket tool and fill that in. And that's just all this is doing is allowing me to see where my UVs are. Now that I know where those are, I can use Photoshop as a tool to edit this, right? And so there's a couple things I could do. One of which is I could go ahead and go to Place, we'll say Place Embedded. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my snakeskin.jpg file. I'm going to click on place. And you'll see that 1, it's absolutely tiny right now, and 2, it has a white background. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is zoom out a little bit here, and I'm going to scale this to start with. And it used to be that you had to hold down Shift to scale it uniformly. Now you just click and drag, and that's uniform scale, and you hold down Shift to scale it non-uniformly. However, if I hold down Option while I do this, it will pull it out from the center, right? And so now I can't see the grid under this or even on top of this. If I zoom in some, I might be able to. But for whatever reason, it's not even up. There we go. Right? And so the white background is making it really tricky to see if I'm at the right scale or not yet. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to double click to just set that transform for the time being. And then I'm going to use my magic wand tool, and I'm going to select all the white pixels on this layer, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to select and select inverse, and then come down here and create a mask from that by clicking on the little mask button. Right? And that's going to trim this off so all I see is the snake. And one thing I want you to notice, now I'm going to use my move tool, is that it's actually upside down. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this and all the way around, hold down Shift to hold it so it snaps. If you do not have these, actually maybe they just updated it so it always has the transform handles on it. There used to be a checkbox that you had to check to get your handles, but it looks like they've changed that. I'm using the brand new version that was just released. Now, I'm going to do a pretty terrible job with this. I'm not going to do the best job ever. So now if I hold down Option and click and drag, I should, and then actually hold down Shift so it is only expanding horizontally. I can stretch this out so it more or less covers that that mesh. There's this one area right in here that's problematic, and so what might make sense is to create a new layer once I set this up. I might want to create a new layer, right? And then I can use my clone tool, and I can just hold down Option, click over here, make sure I have it set to current and below up here in the top bar. And then make my brush bigger, which if you use the opening and closing bracket tool, you can just very quickly make your brush larger and smaller. And then I can just kind of paint on here to make sure that that edge goes further, and then undo that last little bit. So maybe I'll just go ahead and do this in a couple pieces. So I'm going to pull down here and just come over to about here, let go, and then just come back here one more time and just pull through. Okay, and it doesn't matter, there's the sloppiness on the edges, as long as I've covered that mesh, I'm good to go. So now that I've made that change, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of this layer 1 here. I'm going to hit save. Right? So I'm in Photoshop, saving it. Then I'm going to go back to Cinema4D. And once I go back to Cinema4D, nothing has changed here. And so what I need to do is I need to change this. So if I go to Materials and I go to the Texture tab over here, I can come up and I can come down to Reload All Textures. If I click on that, and it'll say, do you really want to save? I'm going to say sure, sure, sure. And so, what's going to happen is that it's going to then apply the changes that I made. And so you can see I still have my grid on there, but now I have this snake skin that is really pretty well wrapped to this, that honestly would be a much bigger pain in the butt to do in Cinema4D than it was to do in Photoshop. Right? And so, so I've got that. So now I can come in here, and if I want to make other edits, if I go to the Layers panel, right, I can obviously turn my UV mesh off because I don't need that. But I could change the way that this blends as well. So I could say, oh, this should be set to multiply. Right? And, oh, and these other layers are off. So let's turn these other layers on now that I have this set to multiply. Right? And so now I've got, whatever layers I did first, and they're being overlaid by the snakeskin, but it's basically creating this like false color thing that looks super cheesy. And I could change this to whatever mode I want. Right? I can make it add, which is just going to make it really bright and extra ugly. But right, there's several different ways that I could work with this if I was interested in having some of this texture on here. There we go. Pin light might be a nice one. And so, right, so that's one way that you can work, right? You can bring things back and forth between Photoshop and Cinema4D. And that's all there is to this tutorial. Just, again, a reminder, make sure that when you save your file, you're saving all your textures. And as you start this process, after you've created your first texture, it's always good, right, when you go to Bodypaint and you go to your wizard and you start painting, just go ahead and save project with assets. Then everything's where it should be in one folder. And then you can continue to work from there. And then when you save the project, it'll ask if you want to save all your materials. All right, that's all I got.